My people, welcome back to the Open Play podcast. I'm your host today, Ikena, aka Reunited IK, joined by my co-host today, Dai, aka Statman. Dai, how you feeling today, man?
Good, man. I'm good. Really excited for today's episode. Really
Yes,
excited.
as always, man. And today we have another interesting conversation. I feel like every time I say interesting conversation, I'm just like, every conversation is interesting, man. But this one
It
is
is.
going to be interesting because Spain very much have a goalkeeping dilemma on their hands with four quality keepers in their own right in the shape of Unai Simon, David Raya, Joan Garcia, and Alex Romero. The question now is who goes to the World Cup, who starts, and who gets left behind. And let's start with who goes to the World Cup because we have four keepers, but we know that only three are going to make it. So out of these four goalkeepers right now, who do you see going to the World Cup?
To me, this is like a pretty open shot case. I think there's three guys here. Not much better than the fourth. I would currently go Raya, Garcia, and Unai Simon as my goalkeeping trio
Hmm.
going to the tournament. I feel very happy about that. I think very few nations. I feel like I see this almost every episode. Like very few nations can do this, and very few nations can do that. But I think
Yeah,
that this is
but it's
actually
true.
really good. Yeah, it's true. So I think this is a really fun goalkeeping triage to have here. Three like really solid guys. And I think very few national teams. So you and I were talking about it just beforehand about Germany, who I don't think they have nearly the talent here in this position. But I think that this will be one of the very few nations that can roll out like three guys that you genuinely feel very good about.
And Spain have always been that nation, right? Like they always have one or two guys that they can roll out in that goalkeeping position, like Casillas, De Gea, like the quality is immense. But I very much agree with you in the sense of like, Unai Simon, David Raya, and John Garcia. And I had a feeling we are going to agree. So I wanted to make it a bit more interesting. So let's say that Unai Simon, who has been Spain's number one for the past few years, has to go. He's a certified person that has to go, right? And let's throw in Alex Romero in there because he's just like, an alternate and, just someone that is comfortable sitting on the bench being a reserve, right? So you only pick between David Raya and John Garcia. Between those two, one goes, who do you go with?
Oh,
Yes,
this is
sir.
very this is unfortunate for one guy who probably could be having himself a great year. His team look like they might be able to win the championship the league this season. His team looks like it's also going to go deep in the Champions League.
um,
Um,
these are both the
you know,
teams, so I don't know who you're
oh,
talking about.
exactly. That's the point. That's what I'm leading up to here. Um, but there's just been one guy who has separated himself in the conversations of goalkeepers just in general. And so if I cannot take both David Raya and Joe Garcia, my answer is that David Raya needs to get left at home. He is not
Mm,
the guy we're going with. We're going with John Garcia,
mm,
who the Barcelona
mm,
shotstopper has probably been the best goalkeeper on the planet.
mm.
Otherworldly level of shot stopping. Um, goals on target is the metric. Expected goals on target is the metric that measures shot quality. It basically allows you to understand above expected um how many goals that goalkeepers have prevented. It basically takes XG and only accounts for shots that were on target. So if the shot was not on target, it's not a savable shot. So we only account for shots that, of course, were on goal. This season, John Garcia is 9.47 expected goals on target above expected. So you saved about the way you can interpret this is that John Garcia has saved Barcelona about 10 goals worth of goals this season.
Bro.
Otherworldly as a shotstopper, if you include the Champions League in that, it's about 6.72. Just for comparison, Raya is at 1.05 across all competitions, while Unai Simon is at a minus 1.74,
Mm,
0.50 just in La Liga, and Romero,
yeah,
who only plays in La Liga, is at a minus 2.23.
yeah.
So Garcia is one of the perennial shortstoppers. Barcelona hunted him out when he was at Espanyol, and were able to land him, especially ahead of Arsenal, who are in talks, I think, at a certain point in time with that. And ever since then, he has really like truly separated himself as what to me is the best goalkeeper on the planet. He is absolutely commanding in his box. He's an unbelievable shot stopper.
Hmm.
Good with the ball at his feet, and very impressive as a goalkeeper. Um,
Yeah.
so that would be my answer. I really like John Garcia. He's so good.
I
He's so
mean,
good.
as a Real Madrid fan, it's hard to admit it, but he is a very, very good shot stopper. He's a very, very good goalkeeper in general. And I want to jump in that topic a little bit, but before that, I want to talk about Spain's current number one in Unai Simon, who at the moment right now I think is having his worst season in a Bilbao shirt. I don't know if all of that is necessarily his fault because Bilbao in general have just not been great this season compared to how good they normally are. I mean, like what that night in La Liga with 38 points, that should tell you a lot compared to when they're normally like fourth in La Liga, fourth or fifth, something like that, always in and around those Champions League positions, right? So when I Simon is not having his best season so far, which was what makes this conversation even more interesting because it's like, does he start? Does he not start? Like, do you still depend on him? I will get into that at some point. But do you have anything to say about the Unai Simon situation in terms of like Spain trusting him and him going to the World Cup?
I think it's tough. I think it's tough. We talk a lot about how the World Cup is an equal dance between basically having a structure, being able to know, having like you don't want to be too fluid in the sense that you kind of want to know who is our goalkeeper, who is our central midfielder, who's our
Mm,
six, who is the guy that we know is going to start up top. You like to the teams that better teams are teams that are able to knock down who those players are, and even if they have depth in those positions, there's a structure, there's an understanding, there's a hierarchy. So I can understand the case for having Simon, continue in his role. For your point, exactly as you pointed out, with that same expected goals on target, which yeah, on the goalkeeping end just comes out to goals prevented. You're entirely right. Simon in 23-24 was at 6.61 expected goals prevented, 2.80 this season, all competitions. Last season,
mm.
and then now he's at minus 1.74. So the eye test and the stats agree on that. He's definitely not having one of his better seasons. Um,
How do you go about these situations though when it comes to the World Cup? Because you have this guy who has been starting for Spain for a while, but at the same time, he's not having the best club form, but it's not necessarily his fault, like I said, right? So how does the manager navigate this situation? Does he say, oh, it's not his fault, so he's still my number one guy, or does he go with somebody who is actually having like a great season in João Garcia or David Raya?
I think you need to be upfront. Like ultimately, these are professionals. I think it is kind of important to be upfront with them, and I do think that for all the credits we give professionals, because these are some of the most ruthless individuals around. Like to become an athlete is a not a simple. It's not just anybody can do. You have to have the right mentality as well as physical gifts. It's a very small club of people who are able to make it professional. So I do think that from a competitive standpoint, it's never good to hear that you're going with somebody else, especially in a position like goalkeeper where it's not like centre back or a winger where you have one or two spots you may be able to fill in. I just think you have to go up there and you have to be honest. And for as good as Simon is, or any of the Spain goalkeepers here, part of that understanding is just knowing when you have one of, because I do think that Garcia has become one of those players where now, when we talk about him, like we're talking about one of the best players on the planet. And I think that when he gets to that point, like there has to be a mutual understanding that, you may be the next guy up if the situation changes, but that we have to go with the guy here who is, I don't want to say who has the hot hand, but part of international tournaments is trying to understand how to balance this hierarchy with awarding, like I said before in previous episode, awarding like great seasons. And I think that Simon is going to just have to acknowledge here that he hasn't been up to the standard that probably befits being able to go in and be an undroppable
Yeah.
player. I think that the level of competition and talent at that position is just way too difficult to have bad seasons. You cannot have a bad season when there are two or three guys who can truly push you in your position.
But do you do that in goalkeeping position though? Like, do you rotate based on the season that they're having, or do you just go with who you know?
I think that when the talent level is as close as it is here, you 100% go with you can rotate. Like we're not talking about like when I see with all due respect to him, he's not Manuel Neuer. He's not
Mm,
Ikakasia. He's not Gianluigi Buffon. He's not somebody who has pedigree, he hasn't won a World Cup. He hasn't. There isn't that level of affinity. He's not the captain. He's not. Um,
mm,
I understand exactly where you're coming from, but I do think that there is a level whereby if you are just, and it's hard to tell because we're not in the dressing room. We don't know what impact Unai Simon has on his teammates or how they review him, how they view him, and how he's revered in the locker room. What we do know is that John Garcia is one of the best shotstoppers in the world. We know he's having an awesome season. We know he may win the league this year. We know he's competing on all fronts. He might get himself a Champions League medal. All sorts of things happen here. But I think that he's having such a good season here where you have to go with the guy who gives you the best opportunity. And
yeah,
particularly in as a goalkeeping where these are one-off games. We're not talking about a season here. We're talking about win or go home. I think you always want to have your best players on the pitch. And I think John Garcia at this point is Spain's best goalkeeper, and he needs to be there no matter what. I think if there was more of a guy, I think if there was more competition, like if Unai Simon was having a John Garcia kind of season, I think then you probably
mm,
defer to the guy who has stability in the role. But I think as it pertains to um having your best player, you go out and you have your best player in that position.
yeah. Because I agree with a lot of things that you said, and you do want to have your best player in that position, but I just feel like goalkeeper is such a fragile position, especially to like hard launch somebody, because this would very much be John Garcia's first like major turn. This is his first call up, like this international break is his first call up, right? So it would be very much hard launching him, and I just feel like a lot of positions on the pitch, even defenders, right, but mainly like attackers, maybe midfielders. Like I understand hard launching them. Never played in a World Cup, never played in a Euros. Okay, you can play in this upcoming tournament, right? But for a goalkeeper, I just feel like I'm not as comfortable hard launching somebody. Like, okay, I've never played in a World Cup, I've never played for Spain, period. Like, you're going to be our number one at this World Cup that we are very much favorites in. I just feel like no matter the season that he's having right now, you just go with a player like Unai Simon who has been there before. And whatever happens, like, like you said, like it's one of games and everything, like there's not a full season. But at the same time, I just feel like, Unai Simon has been there before. He hasn't really done anything special for Spain, right? But he has won things with Spain. He has been there for Spain all these years. Like they know him. De La Fuente knows him. And I just feel like that's the person that you take and then you start just because he knows the environment. It's a different environment than club football. But what do you think about this sentiment, though, in terms of like, because I know you're very strong on John Garcia starting, but what do you think about this sentiment in terms of like maybe Unai Simon going, starting, maybe like the first game, and then Jean Garcia starting the second game, and whoever does better? I know that that's a very hard way to go about it, especially like goalkeepers. But you know, like it depends on how many shots you concede in each game, how the team plays, and everything. But is that something that you see them doing, or is that something that you see them sorting out even in this international break? Who starts?
I think it's tough. I think it's one of those things whereby you kind of you're doing a lot of balancing act. I don't know if there's a realistic situation in which you can go about this because goalkeeper is probably one of the few positions where you don't want to have flexibility. You don't want
Mm,
to have to experiment with your goalkeeper. It get this is universal to club football and to international football. If you don't if your number one position is flimsy or it's there isn't a clear understanding of who your number one is, it can create a lot of diversion in your squad.
mm,
I think it's tough because I don't think the level of position you're playing, especially in the group stage, is ever going to be a real reflection of I don't know what Spain's group on top of my head is, but
yeah.
obviously there's one team in that group that would be far better than just because of the way the seeding is and everything. I think I'm going to try and pull it up here in front of me in real time, just so
Mm,
I can kind of get. So yeah, so they're playing Cape Verde, Saudi Arabia, and Uruguay. So if you play Uruguay first and you go when I Simon, but then you play Cape Verde and
okay.
then you go John
Yeah.
Garcia, I don't necessarily think it's reflects the environment because
Yeah.
if Simon struggles, then you'd say, oh, well, he played the much better Uruguay. So it's tough. I think I call these are always good questions to have.
Mm,
You know, the last thing you want is to look around and not think you have um somebody who can do the job at the position. Um, and for what it's worth, I think so far Spain in their most recent international game, a 3-0 win against Serbia, actually went with Unai Simon, and Garcia did not even make the bench. So it's going to be really hard to kind of get the idea of how exactly they go about this. Um, it's definitely a very delicate situation, and so
Yeah,
I do ultimately see a world where they still go with Unai Simon because that's the guy that's the guy that's been there. That's the guy that has
yeah,
50 plus caps for the country. Um, I even just looked at one of their last games. And they actually, I said he wasn't I said he wasn't the captain, and I was right, but it does appear as though he's at least like the vice or something. So he's
mm,
he's he certainly looked with some level of leadership quality in that dressing room, and I think he would garner some level of respect. I think it's tough.
yeah.
I think that this team is good enough that it may ultimately,
Enough
it
matter
probably
to
will.
reach.
It might not, but it probably will.
Yeah, it probably will. Like, at the end of the day, like it's the World Cup, man. Like
Yeah,
everything matters. Like every position matters. Every decision that you make matters. But I mean, let's move on from that part of the conversation and let's jump into the whole Jean Garcia versus David Raya debate because these are two very like good goalkeepers in their own right. They have different attributes, but they have similar attributes as well to some degree. And they're doing wonders for both their teams. Like David Raya is competing for the Premier League, probably going to end up winning the Premier League this season. And Jean Garcia, his first season at Barcelona, probably go to win La Liga or maybe not, who knows, right? But they're both competing at the highest level, both far in the Champions League, both performing at higher levels for both their teams, right? I feel like it can be a very hard decision, but at the same time, when you look at the stats, when you look at like the impact for the team as well, that are having like Jean Garcia, like you mentioned, they were like the amount of shots that the amount of goals that he's preventing versus David Raya, stuff like that, right? It's like like you just go with Jean Garcia who is having more of an impact, right? But they very much offer like different things as well in terms of like as much as Jean Garcia is decent with his feet, like David Raya is like superior with his feet in my opinion. I even think that David Raya is more of like the complete package. We're talking about like everything that you expect of like a modern day goalkeeper. But at the end of the day, for me, I just feel like can you stop shots? Can you stop shots better than the other guy? Are you competent with the ball at your feet? If you have that, if you are competent with the ball at your feet and you can stop shots better than the other guy, you're my guy. So yeah, I do agree with your sentiment in terms of like Jean Garcia over David Raya. But my question is, do you agree with the sentiment of taking Alex Romero as the third goalkeeper and then picking between David Raya and my Simon? Sorry, David Raya and Jean Garcia.
this might be one of those questions that like we almost. Do you ever? I don't. I can't think of a good example off the top of my head. But have you ever looked at a national team or just yeah, I think a national team and just gone like, wait, why did they take that guy? And it's like I
Mm.
really don't have a good example on the top of my head. I really wish I did. I wish I'm trying to think really hard
But
about
I know
this.
what
About
you mean. Like I've seen stuff
yeah,
like that before, where it's like,
yeah,
why
where
would you
you
go
just,
with this guy?
like the obvious one now seems to be like Jordan Henderson with England, where it's like, wait, but why do you take the 35-year-old midfielder who barely plays at Brentford?
Mm,
And it's like I think that both in the I not eye test versus stats. I don't want to call it that, but the kind of like on either side of the floor in terms of this conversation in terms of how you do like evaluation and like you watch the game, maybe not watch, but like how you perceive certain things. I think that we on both sides of that we seem to fail to understand the importance of intangibles.
mm,
And I think that that's the explanation for why some players occasionally get into teams and we don't really understand why that's the case. And it's kind of tough, because we're not there's no way to measure intangibles. You kind of just seem to you kind of you almost have to read through it. Like occasionally you read like a press briefing or you see like a leak of information. It's not to say that everything is true, but sometimes you can kind of almost, especially with like I don't know if it's the same for you with Manchester United, but it is for me with Spurs and Subis where like I kind of feel like I have an idea of what the dressing room is like just based on reporting and then I don't want to
mm.
say quote unquote
Yeah.
vibes, but you just like kind of understand like who is important to the dressing room, who are players that other players seem to have in high reverence, and it kind of explains why certain players seem to last longer than you think. Like at times, I think we'll be like, oh, why is this player still here? Like a really good example of this, maybe like United would probably be like someone like Johnny Evans, where like
Yeah.
Evans probably was done at United. Like I don't remember when he left specifically, and more so in terms of like his second when he came back and everything. When I
Oh
say he's
yeah.
done, as in like the physically, the technical level, like the game had kind of, I don't say gone by him because of course he was still able to sit there and like give like valuable Premier League minutes, but more so in terms of like Evans had been like physically short at that level for quite a while, and he kind of
Yeah.
just stuck and stuck and stuck, and everybody and maybe and the answer of course why is because Johnny Evans is clearly very well respected in the dressing room. He's clearly somebody that people look up to, and that he's clearly very well revered. And it's explained why he was able to do 2 seasons at United, and it was like nobody was surprised, or And
Yeah.
I think it's the easy answer here for why Ramiro probably gets called up. I don't know. It's one of those hard ones to answer because it kind of
Yeah.
requires you to also
Know what's
gauge
going
like
on behind the scenes.
exactly, and of
Yeah.
course none of us know that. So I think it's fine. I think as long as you make your decision as to who your number one is going to be, decide,
Mm,
and at that point you're just taking the next best available guy. And if you feel
yeah.
this the last slot with somebody who is more so, because truly, how often are you going to your third goalkeeper?
Facts.
Very rarely.
Facts.
So if what we should actually do is that the World Cup should be forced to your third goalkeeper should always just be the most vibes guy. If you do bring a goalkeeper, just like pull every professional footballer who is going to the World Cup on like the most vibes player possible. And like you take the most vibes guy as your 25th man.
I hear that. I can't lie, bro. I hear that so much. I just know the guy that's going to play the music, in charge of the music, in charge of the vibes,
Exactly.
but I hear that for
Exactly.
real. But yeah, I
Exactly.
think that that position, like the third spot, I think that it should go to Alex Romero. Like, he has been called up
Yeah.
for Spain before. He hasn't done anything for Spain, obviously, but he has been called up for Spain. And, he has been in the game for a while. Like, it's better than, I think, in my opinion, it's better than taking like both John Garcia and David Raya, who have barely any experience with Spain. So just just to clarify, your three goalkeepers are Unai Simon, John Garcia, and Alex Romero.
Yeah, if it all pans out today, I think that's what we have. So, and it's unfortunate for someone like Raya who like is having who could have like a really great season for himself here in
Yeah,
in terms of might win the Golden Glove,
Premier League.
win the league, and is still viably in two more competitions, including the Champions League. So unfortunately sometimes this is kind of how it pans out. Um,
Yeah,
and maybe to a certain degree, getting somehow might be worth as well. If he's celebrating with the Champions League and the Premier League, he might not be too concerned.
not too much on the Champions League, but yeah, the Premier League, I guess.
I
But
mean, some things you have to be resigned to. I've been resigned
bro,
to a lot this season, so I'm
not
I'm
too
open
much on
to
that
anything.
Champions League, man. Like, let the guy
Um,
just touch Premier League and go his way. But
I'm open to many things, unfortunately.
that's some Arsenal talk like they want to bring into this conversation. So Unai Simon, Jean Garcia, and Alex Romero are the three goalkeepers that we want to go with, and they you are on the Jean Garcia wave starting for Spain.
100%. I want my best player to play. Like I just
Mm,
okay, not best player. Best player is wrong, but best player in his position. You
yeah.
know what? Maybe
Ah.
no, I can't. I was going to say maybe I'm pushing the John Garcia best playing player, and then I remember that actually like Lamine Yamal decided that he was actually Spanish. So I guess I can't really do that. I guess I
Bro,
can't really do
like
that.
not too much,
I guess I
bro.
can't really
Like,
do that.
so,
I guess I
I
can't
mean,
really do
I
that.
I hear it, man. Like Jean Garcia in goal for you, but I think that for me, just because he has been there before, just because he understands the environment, I feel like club football and international tournaments, especially the World Cup, is very, very different. So I think that you go with somebody that you know, and then if he doesn't perform in his first game or two, which is very hard for Spain to not perform, but whatever happens, then that's why you take a second goalkeeper in Jean Garcia, and that's why you play him right. But I'm going with Jean Garcia. When I Simon as my starter, you're going with Jean Garcia. But that's just our own opinion. Let's know what you guys think in the comments. Who would you take to the World Cup? Who would you start in goal? Let's know all of that. And please, please, please subscribe to the channel if you made it this far. Follow us on social media. The art is the Open Play Pod on X, TikTok, and Instagram. Follow us on social media. With that comes the end of this episode. Hey, this was real, man. This was fun.
Yeah, really fun, man. Really fun dialogue. Okay. Looking forward to the next
Yeah.
one.
Thanks, sir. And we look forward to see you guys in the next one too. So see you guys next time. See.